You know what's better than one good financial projection? Two good financial projections. Today we're going to talk about why you need two to make your plan work most effectively.
Double your pleasure, double your fun with Double Mint financial projections. Yay.
We're going to use one of those.
Yes.
Or two of them.
Both of them.
Okay, got it. Welcome back to Blunt Force Business, our business building podcast. My name is Patrick Marino.
And I'm Brian LaFauci.
Today we're going to talk about financial projections again. And it's good to have two podcasts about financial projections. Did
Absolutely.
you already do one recently?
We've done one before, but this is looking at the importance of, well, I'll let you tell them what it's all about. That's your
Today we're
job.
going to talk about why you need two financial projections, two sets of financial projections for your business and not just one. Are you ready to get going, Mr. LaFauci?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about our three blunt force facts for having two sets of financial projections. Blunt force fact number one, sometimes shit goes right, sometimes shit goes wrong.
Nothing more true has ever been said. Whenever you put together your projections, there's going to be pieces of it that are just going to fall apart. So we're going to today talk about how the build out of two separate ones really helps you to evaluate what things might just fall apart.
Awesome. Blunt force fact number two. Sure, it's good, but compared to what?
A lot of times when we think about an idea and we put it on paper, we're just looking at the numbers in their own little bubble. But there's a million other things you could do with that money. So building two out allows you a comparable to at least start looking at this like this money's going to go to this, or it could go to this, and which one seems better.
And then blunt force fact number three, our favorite, and we're bringing out the cheese factor with this one.
This is high.
There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Right. Like I like doing it with a spoon, so it's slow and painful. Meow. Meow. There is a million different ways that you can look at making money off of your product or service. And this process is going to get you to start thinking about being a little creative and also going to give you a leg up when it's time to scale.
Well, before we get into creativity, I think that one thing we try and get across to our fellow business owners, whether they're in startup mode or whether they're just doing next year's projections or whatever it is, just the idea of having some resilience and redundancy built in as part of the plan. And I think that this can go a long way towards that, which kind of speaks to the first blunt force facts, where if shit goes wrong, what's next? So you have that resiliency built in, and you do it as part of your planning process, not as a, oh shit, things didn't work out the way that my little plan went.
Let me tell you how I kind of came to this idea as being something that I think is really valuable for our listeners whenever you do it. One of the softwares that I use frequently personally and that I use with a lot of our clients is LivePlan. So LivePlan is a cloud-based business planning software. It's my favorite thing on the market.
Give them the discount code.
Discount code, don't have one yet. But LivePlan, if you want to reach out to us and give us a discount code for our podcast, feel free. Actually, Justin, my LivePlan rep, I'm going to be calling you anyways because we got some Live Plans we got to purchase. Shout out to LivePlan.
Get into the pod. Yeah. Get into the pod.
Yeah.
We're
going to hit you up to be a sponsor, Justin. So be ready. So anyways, love the software. I use it all the time. And one of the features of LivePlan is it has a scenario drop down. So what that does, it allows you to click a little button and it says, copy the existing plan and create a new scenario. And I do that all the time. And the first time I did it, we'll play it. When do you think the first time I was in a situation where I had to take a company and completely look at how we're going to make money in the next year or so and do a scenario?
The pandemic.
You are spot on. And I didn't even set you up for that. So the pandemic happened. We had an indoor sport complex and we couldn't run indoor sports. So I clicked scenario button. And that was the first time I realized the value of this process and really came to believing that this should be done for anyone at the startup phase. And it's so frequent that somebody, when someone sends me a business plan, like a startup plan, it always just has one version, one scenario, which is fine and good, but it's not great because what it's telling me is they're thinking about this very linearly, where every business has so many different aspects you can tackle it on. Now, we might not do 8 of these, but almost any company you can look at and say, okay, there's probably 2 really good ways of executing this. And what do those 2 financial plans look like? Because sometimes we think something is a good idea and in our mind, and so then we just build out the finances behind that, right? And that's all we do. We get very linear in that process. That's what most people do. This comes also like with a conversation. This is a great way to like get you also in the mode of utilizing consulting support or mentorship, because one of the ways I like to do this is to sit down with someone, put a business plan on the table and say, all right, if you were to execute this, what would you do different? It's a very blanket statement, right? But it also opens the door for that other person to then just kind of give us, through their lens, feedback. And we talk about all the time in here the importance of diversity of thought, getting feedback, using mentorship, and being able to kind of do that. This is just the tangible product, the tangible end product is building out 2 financial models. So our listeners are probably like, all right, that sounds great, but how does that?
Yeah, immediately in my mind, it's like, okay, well, disaster, right? So I build up my financial plan, and I'm going to be like, all right, apocalypse plan, right? So I have those 2, right? So
We call that a pivot plan. So
plan.
a great thing to do right off the gate is say, now I built this whole thing. I know how it's going to run. If I had to pivot off of this, what is my quickest pivot? That is maybe a completely different deliverable, but that I could pivot to.
Well, I think the obvious one would be, okay, I'm going to talk about your example as well, because I think that you came up with a couple of good ones, and not just you, other people in your industry. But like the obvious one is, okay, I've got a restaurant that focuses on people sitting in my restaurant. Now they can't sit in the restaurant. Do we have a robust delivery system, that kind of thing, or some sort of takeout?
Catering.
Yeah.
Right. So we just did this with a restaurant we're working with right now, where they are very seasonal. And they're really like, how can we grow this revenue? You know, we've been doing really well, but we've been flatline for a while. And, you know, the lane, we took this approach. Like, okay, well, what are the pivots here? What's the easiest thing you can step into? And what can you kind of grow as its own little thing? And we focused on the catering route, because they can build the catering clientele during their busy season. And then when they kind of close down, now they have this very like variable cost, which is great when a business has to shut down, to have a piece of it that you only have to spend when you earn, right? They have this variable cost model that they can continue to run when they close, and they can do it. They can do it out in the community. They can do it, but it's a pivot strategy.
Right.
I'm looking at, yeah.
Right. So disaster, pivot, and then I think that's where I think most people. I think those are probably the easiest. If you're just like, okay, I want you to come up with 2 different financial scenarios. The one would be like the one where you do all the work. You're like, all right, this is what I think I'm going to make. This is what I'm going to do, and then the pivot, the disaster one. So what are some other ways to approach this?
So another way that you can lay this out is, if you are building it out a financial plan where you are the primary service deliverer in any fashion, right? Like if you are, if it's service based and you are the guy going out there, you're a landscaper and you're the guy cutting the grass, or you're a restaurateur and you're the chef behind the line. What would the business plan look like if you had to step back, be the manager of, the owner manager instead of the owner, what I guess you would say like owner operator, right? A little different. What would that financial plan look like?
Right.
And I think that's a great one to build out as a separate one, because now we have we've already started to think if we grow, if we purposely scale, we know what that might look like out the gate if we have to step away and bring someone in to do that, right?
Which I think is a very forward-thinking thing to do, because I don't think there's probably someone at this table who didn't think that far ahead, right, when he was starting his own business. But the idea that if you want to scale, eventually you're going to have to figure out what your role in the company is going to be, right? And a lot of times it could be management,
Yeah.
right? And if you are giving up responsibility, then there's a financially, that's probably the biggest area where I mean, obviously there's quality concerns and stuff like that. But initially, why people don't want to give up control, I think, is financially.
Right.
Because as soon as you bring in something who has to do it, now you are paying them.
Right.
And that means less money. Well, that doesn't mean less money for you necessarily, but it just means that you have to figure out how you're going to get the money for that person. You're going to probably have to do more business, right? But, and it could free you up to do different things or whatever. But I think that's an excellent alternative financial plan, because I think that in order for businesses to effectively scale, it generally starts with the person who started the business finding a new role in it, so that, you know, whether it's taking them out of admin and hiring an admin person, or whether it's hiring more people to do the core function of the business, which then takes this person out, adds additional costs. You know, how is that going to affect our revenue? So I think that's an extremely good way. I'm just kind of emphasizing Brian's point. I think that's a good.
You do.
That's a good alternative plan to have.
Yeah, I love this one, and you can do them all.
Yeah, so
you don't have to just do two.
So how many plans are no? So what? So this is all great. Is there like a?
I got another
and
one.
now, let's talk about the next one.
Because there's one more that I think is, if I was going to say the top three, which I think is a good number, everybody likes three, right? Our listeners can grasp three. So we got the pivot. We got the pivot. You know, the pivot.
I like my
apocalypse pivot plan. We have the manager versus operator plan, and then the other one I really like that's pretty easy because it's easy to do and understand is the fixed versus variable cost plan. So we do one plan where maybe all of our costs that are as many as we can are variable. And, all our employees are contract 1099 and we, we're only buying certain things when we sell product, to a more fixed cost plan where, now forget that, we're going to W-2 people, they're going to be full-time salary, it's flatline, we're flatline all this stuff, we're spending a little more, but it's flatline, and those two can be great. The other thing that's fantastic for our listeners to do is they start to learn how anytime we approach an expense, how the short-term versus long-term difference between fixed and variable can play out through business growth. Because as businesses grow, most businesses that grow do better with a fixed cost. But most startups are able to sustain and get to break even quicker with a variable cost. So doing that one is great. So that would be my third one right out the gate. It's like, if you don't know where to start, one of those three is going to give you a different insight into how this thing can operate.
All right. Awesome. I mean, it's I think that having these different options is just it's a very intentional way for a person to plan their business, right? Instead of just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, you're preparing for different scenarios, but also growth, I think, which is good.
The benefit of this is naturally it gets you thinking sometimes before you even start, how's this going to grow? Because you were right. That is, people get so fixated on the start and sustaining, like, oh, I hope this will work. Where a lot of times they take a little longer to get the mindset of, well, how do we grow it? But building it or understanding the capacity that's going to be needed to get it to growth right out the gate, these models will do that for you. They'll just prepare you for the inevitable. They'll prepare you for stepping away from operating, and they'll prepare you from doing a complete financial revamp of your profit and loss statement.
besides having alternatives and besides being organized for growth, which I think are probably the primary reasons to do this, one of our blunt force facts that we have is that, you know, you take all this time to put together a financial projection, you put together one.
Yep.
And you're pretty, you know, you're pretty happy with it. I did the best I could. Maybe I used Mr. LaFauci's 125-75 rule as well, right? So I'm pretty confident in this projection. Now that I've put it out there, it really looks like we could make money and be successful. Mm-hmm. But that's like a value judgment. That's a statement of value. It's a saying like that this is a good projection.
Yep.
But good is like the word itself requires like there to be a comparison, right? So it's like if you don't do another one of these projections with different scenarios and different thoughts in mind, how do you really know if it's a good projection?
Right.
You know, like you don't. I think what we figured, what we're saying right now is you really don't know.
Right. Because it's good compared to what?
Yeah,
right?
compared to what? And
So
I think that the thing that this could bring out is that when you put together these different scenarios, you could end up, and this is, you correct me if I'm wrong, because you do more of this financial planning with companies than I do. What you would potentially do is improve your initial plan because you're like, oh, this is better. Or maybe this model is better. And maybe I should go with this model because now you've done these different, I mean, you use the word scenarios. You've gone through these different exercises where you're like, you know what, this is a better way to do it than the way that I'm currently thinking about doing it. And you wouldn't have had that epiphany without the process, the planning of these multiple different financial plans.
I'm not going to correct you because you're spot on. Just the act of doing it is going to create, it's going to create these doors that are going to open. That are going to make you look at things through a different lens and give you a barometer, right? Oh, all right. This one does this, but this one does that. And now I can see that. And maybe I want to go this other route. Or maybe I'm validating the route that I originally thought.
Yeah, that's important too. I love that too, because that's a big part of it whenever we do testing, right? We're going to test different ideas, different thoughts. One of the key ways to test is not to come up with a new idea. It's whether it's like, you know, again, like, is it good? Is my initial idea any good? And when you do these other scenarios, then you can become more confident in your current idea, which you don't want to bias. I mean, you want to try and take the bias out, but that is a good consequence of this as well.
It is. And it's a form of research, right? It's a form of creating like some sort of really more in-depth analysis as to the concept, which is a hypothesis, right? If you think about it that way, every business idea, when it starts out in your head, starts out as a hypothesis. This thing, right? And some of them you could say, well, it's a proven hypothesis because other people have done it. Yes, but you haven't done it with your resources and your network and how you're going to deliver it and where you're going to deliver it. So, you know, it's why Burger King and McDonald's can both exist across the street from each other, which may seem crazy, but it's because they have slightly different hypotheses on what people want.
Right.
And both of them are somewhat correct, right?
Well, how does that explain how two Dunkin' Donuts operate across from each other?
That's because Dunkin' Donuts just
prints money.
Yeah. Can I get a Dunkin' Donut ATM, please?
All right, Mr. LaFauci, you and I have both worked in the entrepreneurial space with startup companies and people with no ideas, people with some ideas, or even just business owners who are just freaking in it, right? Small business owners. The business owner is in it. Some of these people just don't want to do any financial predictions.
Right.
They don't want to even start. And now what we're telling them is do 3.
2.
We're telling them to do 2. 2 is the minimum.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
but there's
maybe,
3 or 4 different options, right, as well. So what's the advice here? You gave a good
I'm
piece,
not a paid
which is,
spokesman, but use LivePlan.
Well,
or a software like LivePlan where most of the work is done for you.
Right.
Where once you create one and you create because you're not changing everything.
Yeah.
Now, you know, and cloud-based software like that makes it super easy to make adjustments with like an existing thing.
Yeah.
So use a software. This is like AI too. We have tools out there right now that are readily available to us. If you're not using them, it's silly.
Right.
It's silly. Yeah, they cost a little bit of money, but what they save you in time and energy or mistakes that cost a lot of money, the one, if you're going to start a business without any financial projection, can you succeed? Absolutely. Like, that happens all the time. I'm not going to pretend like it can't. If you want the best chance of conserving your money and time, and at least, giving it the best chance to, if a business did really well out the gate without a financial projection, it would have done even better with one. Simple as that. Because it would, it just would have been more well-defined. So money's money, right? Good is good, but gooder is gooder. So if we can get to gooder by spending a little time, great word, by the way. That's gonna
gooder is gooder.
By the way,
fact number 4.
By the way, the title of this podcast just got changed to 2 financial projections are gooder than one. So at the end of the day, you got to do it. Do your fucking projections, because it's the one thing that makes the most impact when you can see it, when you can really see. I'll give one example and then I'll be done for the podcast. I'm all
goodness.
done. One example. The example is this. I'm working with someone who is looking to start a coffee shop, and he is using LivePlan. Yay. Without my advice. He just sent it to me. Great. Good stuff. Using LivePlan. So he sent me the LivePlan and I'm going through it. And the immediate, and when I tell you this person is ready to jump, they're ready to jump. And the immediate thing I realized is, holy shit, you are missing 2/3 of the expenses involved. And I know, because I've looked at least 24 coffee shop profit and loss statements, at least, probably more. So I went through another company's that is operating has been, and all I did was just copy and pasted the expense line items. And I said, these are the things you need to think about, because they're all going to be there. So that if that hadn't happened, in his mind, he goes into it thinking, this is how much I'm going to make, because he was doing it, right? But so the process is so invaluable, because now he has a better idea of break even, what he's really going to want he's not going to underfund the project. And then we can take those and now we can add the twist to it. Like, okay, so this is your model. What if we applied one of those other 3 to this? All right, what do you do if you have to close, right? Or have to pivot to something else? Would we maybe go into wholesale? What does that market look like, right? Do we want to establish like a roasting function here? There's a great place down in North Kingston that is a coffee shop, but they roast in-house. Great. What a great pivot model, right? If the in-house stuff isn't going, they can really push the wholesale. If they're doing really well in-house, it just gives you these 2 lanes. So, big fan of that. Do it.
See, you're not going to talk anymore. I thought you said you weren't going to talk anymore.
I'm done.
Well, I'm going to reemphasize one of the points you brought up almost near the beginning, is that besides using software, which I think is a good tool, you use a Mr. Lefauci, right? You use a consultant, mentor, friends, community, business community. You got to get yourself into areas where you can, because I think it's really, as you've just discussed, it's hard enough to get somebody to sit down and just do a financial projection. So to do multiple is even harder.
Yeah.
So the second one, again, it's like if you're part of a community where you can bounce ideas off of, like, especially with emergencies and, not especially, but like, I'm just thinking even of just like the apocalypse plan, a lot of times the problem with the apocalypse plan is you don't really know what the apocalypse is. So then you can have conversations with people. It's like, oh, think about, and you can then tell them, like, well, here's this business. This happened to them, like, out of nowhere, right? So they had to come up with this. So it's really hard without that community, without those people to talk to. So whether it's a business consultant, whether it's being some part of just like a community of other business owners where you can bounce ideas off of, or even friends and family, which we've talked about is not always the best, but might be all you have, better than nothing. Mm-hmm. And not the best, not because they're not well-intentioned or smart, but because a lot of times there's bias in there. Yeah. It's like, hey, we want you to do really well, or hey, or sometimes they're too hard on you.
Yeah.
But the idea is like you have to have somebody to to bounce
Yeah, we get that a lot though.
things off. So anything else to close with there, Mr. LaFauci? You've convinced everybody that 2 financial projections are gooder than 1.
2 are gooder than 1. Love it. Good stuff. You want to go through the blunt force facts
yeah.
one more time?
So today we talked about the fact that you need to have 2, actually multiple, but 2 to start financial projections versus having 1. And we have 3 blunt force facts for that. Blunt force facts number 1, sometimes shit goes right, sometimes shit goes wrong. Blunt force fact number 2, sure, it's good, but compared to what? And then blunt force fact number 3, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
We've talked about financials again successfully. Thank you very much for your feedback and your contribution here, Mr. LaFauci. I think our whole audience appreciates it.
Awesome. Love it. Good
All
stuff
right.
today.
We'll hope to see you next time. I'm Patrick Marino.
I'm Brian LaFauci.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.